Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Melbourne AWS user group. I almost got my user groups mixed up then, but we are the AWS user group, and we're at Meetup event number 121, I think, which is quite significant. And it is the last one that we're doing for 2022. Thank God for that. We're off for a couple of months after this, but then, we're off for December after this because nobody wants to come to this on Boxing Day. But we will be back in January for our post-reInvent show, which makes tonight our pre-reInvent show, or the pre-invent, as we call it. It's been a few years, actually, since we've done a pre-invent. Normally, we defer a couple of weeks and come in after reInvent, but hey, we're here now, and there's already been a whole lot of stuff that's been announced. So let's just get right into this. We've got our usual news segment after this, so they'll talk you through some of that stuff that's just been announced. If you've already overwhelmed by the number of announcements like I am, they'll try and summarize it for you. I should actually put up the slides, but then we have two great presentations to follow that as well. Let me sort myself out. I've been off for a couple of months, so I'm a little bit scrambled as to what I'm supposed to be doing here. Yes, reload. Faster would be good. We should have introduction slides. Here we go. So in the spirit of reconciliation, the Melbourne AWS user group acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Oh man, I forgot to bring my iPad too, so I'm running on a tiny phone trying to run a stream. Here we go. Where am I? I should be over here. So this is our agenda. I ran through it quickly before. I'll do the introductions. We'll try and get that out of the way as quick as we can. And then we'll have our What's New segment, which is mostly talking about reInvent for this month. We have two great presentations then. We have Alka and Jeffrey, who are in the front row here. We'll be up first, talking to us about what they want with their data store. Sounds going to be a good one. And then repeat presenter Jason Wood talking a bit more about SSM. It's hiding down the back, but he'll come up after that. We then wrap up quickly with our marketplace segment, which is a way for you if you're looking for work in AWS space or if you're looking to hire people. This is how we try and connect you guys together. And then we'll try and wrap up pretty close to 8 o'clock so everybody can get home or get somewhere more interesting. The way we run things here, please hold off asking questions during the event. It interrupts the speakers. If the speaker asks for you to do that, please by all means, but generally just wait till the end. If you are watching on the live stream, please feel free to pop your questions in any of the social channels listed there. We should probably get rid of Twitter because that's not a thing anymore. Most of you end up asking questions in YouTube anyway. I usually keep an eye on YouTube during the event, so I'll ask the presenter those questions on your behalf. And I have my slides in the wrong order. Yeah, so after the speaker is finished presenting, either raise your hand or ask questions in those channels and I'll ask on your behalf. We'll bring a microphone around to you if you're in the room, and we'll take questions like anybody else would. We do run all of our events here under a code of conduct. I won't go through and read you all of those bits and pieces, but the gist is we try to create a safe community for everybody, regardless of any of those factors up there. So if at any point you don't feel comfortable or if there's something going on that you don't want to be happening, come and let us know. You can grab myself, Ian or Matt down the back, who you'll see them during the news segment after this. Or there are options on the website to submit either via email or you can do anonymously as well. There's an anonymous feedback form on there, and we take any reports through that very seriously. All right, so we run all of these events with the support of our sponsors. Obviously, a lot of this stuff doesn't come for free. There's especially the catering and the rooms and everything else. So a big thank you to CMD, who have been our gold sponsor for 2022. And then also to our silver sponsors, Versant and Civo. If we could get a round of applause for our sponsors. thank you to them for their support for 2022. And also to NAB, who provide this pretty awesome venue for us with all of the fancy screens and all of the audio gear. So big thank you to NAB as well. All right, so the way we normally keep in touch, where we announce things and where you can ask questions if you're on the live stream, is on Slack. URL is there. We'll do an auto invite. I think we're approaching the 1,000 team member mark pretty rapidly. There's a lot of people on the Slack team, and it's a great place to go and ask questions if you're stuck on things, where to find the latest info. We've got channels for jobs as well if you're looking for work or looking to hire. Then we've got some with some automated stuff in there, like the outages channel, the outages bot, and the announcement spots, just to generate conversation around new things and things that are broken. Mostly things that are broken. It gets pretty busy when things break. Aside from being on the Slack team, though, there are also other ways that you can get involved and help out with the running of the user group. One of the hardest things to do with putting these sorts of events on is finding people willing to speak. So if you are interested or you're a little bit nervous or anything like that, come and talk to us. We've got ideas for subjects that you can speak on. We're happy to provide mentoring and to help you through the process of getting up here and standing. I was terrified when I first started doing these sorts of things about 6 years ago. But now look at me, standing here ad-libbing because I didn't prepare for this at all. Woo! Yeah! Thanks. I think we've just closed a sponsorship round, didn't we? So sponsoring is not a thing, but you can talk to us again about 2024 if you like. But we're always looking for extra hands to set up tables, help clean up, this sort of stuff. Even just the small things greatly appreciated on the night. I think I only had one. Yep. There is only one event on that anybody cares about now, and it starts next week. In case you didn't realize that it starts next week, this is your final reminder. It's not too late to grab a ticket. Actually, if you can afford the flights and the hotel and get over there, you can probably still make it. Is anybody actually going that I'm from here? I think we've got one who's already left. No one else going? That's fair enough. I'm not going either. I've signed up so I can watch the virtual stuff, but I'll just stay in bed and stream everything. If you haven't registered to watch all of the sessions and the keynotes, registration's free on the website. And I think that's everything that I've got. I'll get out of the way and we'll go to the news.
Thanks, Rob. Hello, everyone. As Rob briefly mentioned, I'm Arjen.
Matt.
And we're here to talk to you about what's new in AWS. So, a lot of things, as Rob mentioned, have been announced in the last month or so. I did a quick-ish count earlier today, and it was over 400 items. To be fair, a lot of that is this is now available in this region. This is, but still, that's a lot of.
It's an announcement.
Yep. So let's just dive into some of the things we found interesting. First, we'll start with our finally in Sydney segment. Unfortunately, this is not yet finally in Melbourne, which is the real finally we're waiting for. But that's
one day.
That one did not happen.
No, it's going to be keynote next week. Wait and see. It's not.
Cool. So, what do we have? We've got some new instances. Basically, the D versions of the Intel 6th generations. The D means SSDs. So these all have the NVMe SSDs attached to them. If you need instances like that, it's great that they're available now. Then we got Proton. We've discussed Proton before. It is a service we still don't really understand what the point of it is. This now means I'll probably actually have to figure out what that is.
There's going to have to be a blog article or something coming in the foreseeable future because I know customers are going to ask about it.
Yep.
The one, like, the Chime SDK, I'm pretty sure is going to be really exciting for the 6 people on planet Earth that use Chime. Yay, I suppose.
Yep. So, moving on. As a reminder, finally in Sydney just means services that have already been released elsewhere, but were not available in Sydney. So a lot of the stuff we'll be talking about next is also in Sydney.
But it's brand new stuff.
Serverless. First on the list is the SAM CLI Terraform support. Basically, this means that you can run your SAM CLI, or that you can use Terraform to build your infrastructure as code.
That's going to be used with your SAM CLI deployment.
Yep, and you can run it locally
Roundabout.
and all those fun things.
Yep.
Basically, where SAM CLI in the past just supported CloudFormation, because that's what it was built around. Now it also does Terraform.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah. Lambda. Lots of Lambda this month. Node 18. Yay, we can start using current versions again. New stuff around the telemetry API. I'm going to have to do a session on this one because I've been playing with this the last couple of days. Lot more visibility into what's actually happening under the hood in relation with your Lambda functions, which is really nice. It fills in a few gaps that sort of existed, and you sort of had to be, you were forced to use X-ray to try and diagnose. This helps a lot in pulling some of that information out.
Yep. Also, EventBridge got a whole bunch of updates. There's a new scheduler, better filtering, and some fun stuff with rules that basically, one of those is basically you can now try out your rules in the console and then export it as CloudFormation, which is really nice because it's not great to write CloudFormation that then has to translate into complex JSON blobs, and it can get frustrating.
Yeah, there.
So that's cool. And then lastly here is Neptune Serverless. This is Neptune, but serverless.
Serverless, yeah.
Basically, this is a lot like you can scale things down. It will automatically scale up. You don't have to provide any things for it. And if you don't remember what Neptune is, it's a graph database.
Is it serverless in the way that Lambda is serverless, or serverless in the way that Aurora is serverless?
I think it's more in the way of Aurora. So something will still be running.
Quasi serverless.
Yep. Cool. Containers. ECS scale-in protection can be nice. This is basically an extra protection if you have long-running ECS tasks that they don't automatically get scaled in when the rest of an application gets scaled down or scaled in. Basically, you can say, keep this running because it's supposed to stay running. So that's cool.
Fluent Bit and Kubernetes 1.24 support. Yay! All the Kubernetes fans must be going crazy at this point. Or yeah. They're the same people running Chime.
Yep. If you're using App Runner, though, it now has managed runtimes, so you basically don't have to use containers for that anymore and can just hook it up to your repo, which is nice.
That one's pretty nice for getting started. If you're trying to get something in the container ecosystem for the first time, that's a really nice way to sort of get up and running. And now that it supports like or dislike PHP or .NET, hey, it's a good way to get started. And yes, those are fighting words.
I don't think many people will disagree about the PHP.
No, the .NET thing's just for...
Yeah. I know. Oh, I did leave a .NET one in here. I thought that filters them all out. Sorry, Scott. Cool one here on the top for DevOps is CloudFormation support for organizations. So this basically now lets you create accounts, SCPs, or use all that stuff that you had to either click or do other ways.
Yeah.
You can now do it in CloudFormation.
You can now codify your multi-account strategy. Finally.
Yep.
Which is kind of nice. Still don't quite have the ability to do short-lived accounts, but we're getting there slowly, bit by bit. Maybe one day.
We can now delete them, and we can create them.
We can delete a few of them. I think the answer is you spin up 1,000 accounts so that when you get to that, you've got your 10% limit on what you can delete per month is enough to, we won't go down that rat hole tonight.
Yep. Another one on here, just out of curiosity, is anyone here using SAP ABAP? Does anyone know what it is other than me? Cool. I see a couple of people who do. ABAP is the SAP programming language. If you don't know it, be happy. It means you don't work with SAP. Anything else from this you want to call out?
The fault injection service support for network disruptions. That's a good one. Network disruptions are a commonly overlooked failure scenario, or at least with the customers I deal with, they are. Developers aren't world-renowned for their networking skills, and it is rather complicated, so it's nice to see that that's coming in. Fault injection is one of those things that if you haven't looked at it, highly advise you spend a weekend just going through and having a look at what it offers, because there's some really good insight that you can get from it.
Yep.
Oh, the big one. What in my mind could be the best announcement of the month: multiple MFA devices for IAM users. It is one of the more boring announcements of the month, but that solves a lot of use case problems, particularly for larger organizations. You can now have more than one MFA token for your user, which means you don't have to have the token in the cupboard with everybody knowing where the key to the lock is and how we're going to recover it. No. So that's highly advised that you go back and you revisit your MFA processes, particularly on your root accounts.
To be clear, this is not an excuse to give different users, different actual people, MFA tokens for the same account.
No.
Don't do that. This is that a single person can have multiple
keys.
Yep. Another one, also a good point here, is CloudTrail supporting a delegated admin account. So if you set CloudTrail up at the organization level, that it will automatically run CloudTrail in all of your accounts. That used to go to your admin account. Now you can delegate that to the account you actually want it to go, which is likely an audit account or something similar. So that's good to see.
Yeah.
Some other cool stuff. We had 3 new regions. We got 1 each in the past 3 weeks. We did not get Melbourne yet. Really hoping next week, but probably the week after.
Yeah, it's coming. One day.
It's supposed to come this year, so Resource Explorer, though. That's pretty cool. This allows you to basically see the resources in your account. You can set up specific views for what you filtered by. It shows you cross-region overview of what you've got running.
Yeah.
It doesn't support every single service.
Of course not.
But it supports enough to give you a good overview.
it covers most of what you're likely to be running in an account. And I'm sure, as with everything we've seen come from AWS, it's a V1 product. It'll get more and more services over time. But it is nice to see that we can finally go to a single place to see everything that we've got delivered in a single account. That's kind of a novel approach to things.
Yep. I wonder how many people turned this on and discovered that, oh, look, we've got EC2 instances running in Singapore.
That's where that charge is coming from.
Yep.
Again, much like the MFA thing, it's probably worth you going back through your accounts and looking at Resource Explorer and sort of going, oh, yeah, no, that is actually everything I thought that it was there.
Yep.
CloudFront continuous deployment. This might give me a good enough reason to start using CloudFront again. It's expensive, but hey, the ability to do blue, green, and canary based deployments on your CloudFront releases is long overdue.
Yep, but really nice.
Really nice.
Basically, the way it works here is it will set up a staging distribution, and you can access that either by setting headers in your calls, or you can have it set up to do a portion of the traffic to go there. This allows you to test CloudFront changes, but also the new versions of your applications.
Background changes, all those sorts of things.
Yep. So really nice to have.
Connect. Wow, it's been a busy time for the Connect team. Lot of changes, but also they're mostly quality of life, I would say. I know we don't have a whole heap of Connect users in the audience. There's been a few changes to Lex and the ability to tweak timeout values. So when you're interacting with the chatbot, you don't get those awkward 5-10 second pauses while it goes, I didn't actually get what you wanted, and now I've got to wait for the timeout so that I can then go and retry again. There's been some nice changes to the back-end reporting for administrators around customer interaction times and all of that sort of stuff. So some nice quality of life for call center operators, call center admins. And there's also been some more integration points with some more off-the-shelf products. So makes the integration a lot easier. AWS like to remind you that it can integrate with anything because it talks to Lambda, but that's kind of just a cheat way of looking at things. You can do anything if it integrates with Lambda. Doesn't mean you want to. So lots on Connect, but you know, I'm still just happy that they gave me the ability to deploy it via code the other month. Like, you know, that was the bit I was happy about.
Yep. And then the last one to call out was one from this morning, so I haven't actually had a chance to play with it yet. But SNS payload filtering, basically now you can filter your SNS topic by the payload.
Yeah.
So
not just the attributes attached to it.
Yeah, you can just filter it by what is being sent, which is really nice.
Yeah, this is on my to play with this weekend list, because there's some potential there's a lot of potential use cases here around being able to make sure that, I don't know, let's hypothetically say personally identifiable information doesn't make it into a non-production, non-secured environment and end up leaking. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, healthcare. Identity documents, maybe. Could be anything.
Interesting examples.
Hypothetical.
Yeah. Cool. But that's it for
the news.
What we're talking about with the news. Looking forward to lots more.
There will be more. Yeah. We had 400 in the last month. Yeah. How many are we going to get in the next week? Yeah.
Too many, probably.
Probably. Cool.
Is that coming through on the audio? Yep, cool. I can never tell if it's on or off without pulling it off my belt. Do you guys want to come up and plug in?
Sounds fun.
I could probably leave those on for you, actually.
Here we go. Just going to do the... can I have one of them?
Yep.
Hello there. We're just going to do the traditional start of the talk ceremony, which involves plugging the laptop in. Everyone's
So
favourite
it should show up here when you're ready, but we're not seeing any. There we go.
There we go. All right.
If you're good to go, then I'll just run through the quick intro we've got for you.
Just give me a second while I do some...
It's all right. You can do that while I speak.
Pressure. Pressure.
All right. So by way of introduction, Alka has managed many varied teams across many varied products and cultures, having worked in both Australia and Indian software companies. She has seen firsthand how frustrating it is for a product development team to have to focus outside their skill set just to be able to store their data. She currently manages several teams dedicated to the maintenance of legacy data stores and the provisionings of new ones at Zendesk. Jeffrey has worked in data since before Hadoop even existed. That's pretty impressive. That's a long data career.
Or very, very shameful.
He's worked with machine learning products, data warehousing, analytics, and in real-time streaming products. He's the group tech lead of self-service storage at Zendesk. All good to go?
Let's do it.
All right, let me bring your screen up so people can actually see your thing.
Kind of excited. I've never seen this many screens in a same room before.
There you go.
Ooh. All right. So, who wants to talk about data stores? We've got 3 people, 4 out of a potential 60. I don't know if we should do the talk. Like, they're not that interested. All right, I'm going to try again. There's a hint here, right? Who wants to talk about data stores? That's just... I fully admit that is as good as it's going to get. Fair enough. All right. So, before we get to the data stores part, which you're clearly so enthusiastic for, we have to talk about Zendesk, which is the context in which we're going to talk about these data stores. Now, Zendesk is, and I'm going to see if I can get the words right, a customer service and relationship service. And what that means is we have customers who are businesses, and we help those customers with their customers. And I always have to think about this because it's a bit complicated. But basically, every time you complain when you buy a new thing or you send an email to your phone service for disconnecting you again, that's probably getting converted into a ticket somewhere. Nice air conditioning there. That gets converted into a ticket in some sort of customer service system. Zendesk. Right? So you have probably interacted with Zendesk and not even known it. And I bet you, if you go through your email now, which you won't because this is an engaging and enjoyable talk, you'll find powered by Zendesk on at least one of those emails. But we don't just do that. We also do help centers, which is where you look up articles on how to do things. We do voice, which is where you do your VoIP phony type stuff. We do chat, where you can talk to someone and complain about whatever it is on the website. And we've recently gone into the WeChat, WhatsApp native chat space because a lot of people like to chat. So that's what we do there, and it's kind of fun. And as you've probably guessed from the title of the talk and the fact that I'm talking about this, I work at Zendesk, and so does Alka.
And so do many more engineers. We have offices all around the world, be it APAC, EMEA, or Europe, and we get to work and collaborate with all of them. Also, we've got a huge customer base, as you can see. Data in. Yeah.
Closer.
Is it better now? Yeah.
If you can uncomfortably hear yourself, that's when it's good.
So I was talking about customers. Yes, we've got a lot of customers, and we are talking about petabytes of data and hundreds of data stores. So let's talk about data stores.
Ready? Yeah. Hang on. Shit. Oh God. Hang on.
That's all good.
Hang on. Pressure. Oh God, I've unlocked my phone. Yeah, I promise this is worth it. This is not a comedic build-up. I'm actually definitely... Okay, here we go.
But before we talk about the data stores, I just want to talk about who we are. I'm Alka Kohli, Engineering Manager at Zendesk, and this is Jeffrey Theobald, Group Tech Lead at Zendesk.
Which we've introduced before, but don't worry, we'll make sure you know. So here we go. For the benefit of those streaming, I've just played popular Christmas song Jingle Bell Rock, made in around 1960s. You can look it up if you'd like. Anyway, all of that was to set a scene for you. Do you feel it? Do you feel the Christmas spirit? I'm wearing a hat. The least you could do is pretend to be interested. It is the December the 24th, 6 p.m., and you're stuck at work. And for reasons through no fault of your own, you now need to provision a data store, which sucks because depending on your infrastructure and organization, you have to talk to other teams, do some sort of filey stuff, make some things somewhere. It's not going to be a very good day. So you go back to your inner child. You go to your place of hope and you pray for a Christmas miracle and you write a letter to Santa. And it goes like this. It goes, Dear Santa, I don't want to learn a million things about IAM, parameter groups, user profiles, authentication, availability zones, resilience, right of failover, security, and compliance. Please, please, please don't make me think. All I want for Christmas is a data store. Love, Jeff. Can we just, I promise, just move the screen there before we do the next bit. Age 5. Thank you for laughing. Keep trying.
So in reality, yes, engineers don't want to learn a billion things before they can actually provision a data store. They just want to go down with standardized things so that they can just get their data stores. And by the way, not every engineer you work with is smart enough to pick sensible defaults. When we started working at Zendesk, at the time when we were looking at the data stores, it was growing really, really fast, which meant we wanted to ensure that our engineering teams could actually provision their data stores reliably and quickly, which also meant that we had to focus on how do we end up building internal tooling which is better, faster, secure. One more thing around Zendesk is like we had this one gigantic data store which was being used by so many apps. And we had a team of DBAs which would actually help us to maintain and take care of those systems. For other data stores, we had a team of DevOps engineers who would help us to provision and take care of those systems. So every single time an engineer wants a data store, they would have to go down to these multiple teams, take care of these many aspects, work on all of the processes and manual who were being involved over there. Security and compliance was a bigger one, which meant sometimes provisioning a data store would take somewhere from weeks to months.
So I'd like you to imagine your letter. Okay, I'm going to try that again. So I'd like you to imagine. I didn't fuck it up before. I'd like you to imagine your letter has been answered. Santa has run around the world and he has delivered Aurora to a whole bunch of small children who want Aurora for some reason. But instead of them smiling happily as they open their presents, they're kind of angry. And it could be because Santa arrived at Easter. See, the thing is, right, friends, it's really important to actually get these things delivered on time. But there are many other ways in which Santa cannot exactly succeed. At Zendesk, we had this slight problem where we were generally using a very large, very shared set of resources, which is good for cost, but not so good for noisy neighbors and all of those sort of problems. So if you haven't dealt with those, although I'm sure everyone in this room has, a noisy neighbor issue is when an application hammers the absolute hell out of your infrastructure and the applications next to it die. which is often known as a blast radius or the effect of a blast radius. So we wanted to keep that down because this was happening every now and then. We would get an outage and Zendesk would look bad, which is not something that we want. And the problem is that Zendesk was getting bigger and getting more and more data and more services. We were growing at a significant rate. This path was no longer sustainable. So something had to change.
So we went back to the basics. What do engineers really want? They don't want to think about all of these aspects, right, before provisioning a data store. At the same time, we wanted to take care of the problems that Jeff highlighted in the previous slide around reliability, noisy neighbors. We also wanted to get the provision time from weeks, months to maybe hours. Was that even possible? We all started with the same question, and we started thinking around the system that we really wanted to design. A system maybe which ends up following certain defaults, sensible defaults, a system probably which is aligned with what we already had in place, a system which would probably work for most of the customers.
What a dream.
Yeah. Also, no matter which data store we are talking about, be it a relational data store or a key value pair, we just wanted a standard way of doing things. So what we were talking about with minimum steps, probably maximum benefits for the engineering team.
So we started making some choices. See, AWS offers a lot of data stores, but we wanted to support as few as possible because we're lazy, as all good developers should be. So we picked a few, and we picked these 4 to try and cover most of the cases that you care about. The first one's fairly obvious. Aurora, which is the relational database system, pretty damn decent. You can do clustered mode, which means that you can have a primary writer and replicas as readers, and failovers are quite cheap, although they do incur a very brief timeout. And that means that you have high availability with almost no touch. So yeah, that's also available for Postgres if you're interested in that. We mostly have MySQL stuff because that's what our DBAs know and most of our coders with it. But you know, I think we can all agree on which is the better database. Next up is trusty old DynamoDB. A very nice key value store if you haven't used it. Fantastic for handling scale. Secondary indexes mean that you can query not just by the key, but also a global secondary index, potentially multiple of those. So if you have a huge amount of data that you need to get to really fast, and you need to be able to do it in only 2, maybe 3 different ways, or 1, then DynamoDB is what you want. Third up is the other variation of key value, which is in-memory caches. I feel like I'm talking to people who already know all of this stuff, but I'm going to keep talking anyway because you're not laughing enough. So anyway, Redis is a key value store in memory. We actually use, oh God, what's it called? What's the name of the... Elasticache, that's it. We use Elasticache Redis. The other variant is Memcache. They're more or less the same thing for most purposes. I mean, Redis has a whole bunch of little secret things that hopefully nobody uses. Right? Yeah. Cool. And that's really handy for when you have expensive operations that you want to memorize, cheapen things down, and it can be a really good way of saving a whole bunch of money and keeping your apps lightweight and fast. And finally, sometimes you really just want to write a file. S3's been around forever. I would really hope that everyone knows S3. Everyone knows S3? For the purpose of those listening on the stream, the audience has unenthusiastically said yes. So that's what we're aiming to do. We wanted to make sure that all of these had sensible defaults and just worked.
So we asked the engineers to write another letter, but this time it was in YAML. We needed to see what really mattered, and to be honest, there were really few things that mattered. The top part of the YAML, as you can see over there, it's basically about who owns the service, what it does. The infrastructure section was wherein any engineer would end up listing down the data stores that they need. For example, in this case, we're talking about Aurora, and all that the engineers need to specify is the instance size and the number of readers that they needed, along with the team who will be provisioning it. So this was all that was required from the engineer's perspective. But in terms of, there was more to it, and there was work that we had to take into consideration that you would need for any data store. So once a data store has been provisioned, you would really need information around how do you connect to the data store? What about the address? What about the port so that you can connect to your data stores? Also, it was equally important to consider the username and password. Maybe we would need IAM tokens. What about rotation of those passwords? So if you're talking from security and compliance perspective, these things were really, really important and something that we had to take into consideration. The other thing was human access. So sometimes there could be cases wherein a human needs to access the production data. Probably we needed a console over there to be in place. Also, given we're talking about security and compliance and all of those SOC 2 controls that engineers need to think about, all of this needs to be audited.
So that's the YAML that we were giving, but you're probably wondering, it's a file. What are we doing with the file? Well, I'm going to tell you. I can see you're all really, really enthusiastic about that too. Oh dear, it's going to be a long night. All right, here we go. So we've got this YAML file, wonderful YAML file, very few lines, lots of information in it. And what we do is we get engineers to send it to a web app. This web app, behind the scenes, separates out the individual sections. So there could be multiple data stores here, maybe a few S3, maybe a few Aurora, maybe a Redis, whatever, a bunch of them. It breaks them into individual records and sends them down to a Kubernetes operator. Now, the K word has already been said once tonight, and it was hard to judge. No? Nobody likes Kubernetes? No? Someone's got to like it. It exists. As a concept, it does indeed exist. Now, Kubernetes, you could argue both ways. There are benefits and cons. It could just as easily be another web server or anything that just passes along a message. Something that you go, hey, I want an Aurora, make me an Aurora. And that's what we did. We also made sure that we handled other extra pieces because it's not just enough to provision the data store. We needed a standardized way of making sure that data store information was easily accessible to the developers. In this case, there are 2 systems. Why 2 instead of 1? Well, see, Temporth handles the secrets. So if I'm assuming everyone's fairly infrastructure here, does the word secret engine terrify you? No, maybe a bit? Okay, secret engine is a thing in Vault and probably in other stuff as well that takes a serious admin user and provisions temporary users with a random username and password and then deletes them over a short length of time. Nothing too complicated, but it does mean that we can have like these users who are rapidly rotated. And I mean rapidly, like 7 days kind of thing. And those credentials, if we lose them, if they get exposed, you don't lose so much. So it's very, very valuable from a security perspective. The other half of the equation is the thing we talked about, which is, how do you know what host you're on, what's the port, and that sort of thing. And that's in configuration delivery. Why are these separate? Well, the secrets, you kind of got to be a bit careful with. You don't really want those sitting exposed in the open. But the configuration can just be a Kubernetes config map, which is what we did. And that allows you to be able to volume mount that config map straight onto the container, and the engineer gets everything they need without having to poll outwards, which was the aim here. So that's the highest high level. What happens when an engineer deploys? Well, we get the engineer to deploy, and because that creates a Kubernetes pod, we intercept it with, I'm going to get this wrong, but I'll try and say it right. It is,
Mutating webhook.
Which one?
Mutating webhook.
That's right. It's a mutating webhook. Sorry, I can never remember the name of it. It's a weird little thing. So every time it sees a deploy, we check for a certain tag. We go through and we manipulate that deploy and add a secret init container and sidecar. The init container goes through to Vault, gets the config and credentials, drops it in the local file system of the container, which is as secure as you're going to get reasonably, and it may ensure the config. I'm going to try the sentence again. And the config delivery connects the map up, but that's not done as part of the init container. The second container here, why have you got a sidecar there? Well, this is the genius bit, or very stupid, depending on how you look at it. See, all of those secrets, they don't last too long, right? IAM credentials in particular only last 12 hours unless you do some magic. So what we do is we have a sidecar that just sits on the TTL, and as you get closer and closer to expiry, it kills them, which means the app restarts, it gets a new set of credentials, and as far as the app is concerned, those credentials are static. So if you don't care about credentials, and most app developers don't, and nor should they. To them, it's just a static password that they get in a file and everything works as they expect, which is kind of handy because a lot of libraries don't do that. But the AWS libraries with IAM tokens do. We had a bit of both, so we needed to handle both situations there. Now, this looks really easy to you genius people, I'm sure. The reality is somewhat more complicated. Now, there's a lot going on here. I could talk about this for weeks. You all want me to talk about it for weeks, don't you? No? No. Nobody wants to talk about this, and I totally understand. I just want you to keep in mind the concepts that we are dealing with, which is we've got a provisioning of data stores, and we've got a deploy phase, and that's how we handle all of our stuff. So we've made this perfect system. I'm sure you can all agree. Every software engineering system is perfect and never goes wrong ever. But just in case, just tiny chance, I know, we wanted to test it. Now, typically in development, you've got an application, so you fire up something that either hits a browser and pretends to do a bunch of stuff, or hits an API and returns a response, and you know you're all right. We had to invert this concept, where we had an application that tested a system rather than a system that tested an application. So we had a test app, and all it does is connect to a bunch of data stores, and make sure that we can read from them, write from them, we can do all the things we expect to do, and none of the things that we shouldn't. Specifically creating users and things like that that will blow permissions and break all of our compliance rules. So that's enough to make sure that the connections are healthy, but as well as that, we needed to ensure that we could provision. So twice a day, we'd actually provision a new Aurora, a new Redis, a new Dynamo, check that we can connect to it, and tear it all down again. Because if we were going to put this in front of customers, we wanted to make sure that it was just going to work. TM. So with these two together, we've essentially got a system of smoke tests and acceptance tests, which mean that we can tell if connectivity is down within minutes because of that test app, and we can tell whether our provisioning is down daily, and our setup, our temp auth, the init container I talked about before, within the hour. So we've got pretty good coverage, and we added a whole bunch of monitoring to make sure that everything was doing what we expected, and we weren't getting a bunch of exceptions. So, with that in mind, we felt pretty smug. We delivered a bunch of stuff, we'd worked hard on it, we'd written the documentation, we set up the support channels. So we sent it to a bunch of people, and they loved it. They loved it. They definitely loved it. They loved it. It was really good. So they just used it. Nothing else needed to be done. Job done. We sat down and relaxed for the rest of the year. That's exactly what happened. Not really. No, the problem with people using stuff is they want to use it more. I've joked about people doing stupid things. You can tell it was a joke because all of you laughed. Wow. I know we're in a bank, but sheesh. But people do things that you will never, ever, ever expect. And as we got more users, we got more use cases, which is great. That's the kind of problem that you want to do. So the very first thing that happened is those genius pod evictions kind of caused some trouble, because a lot of apps had an extremely expensive startup. Now, this is kind of wrong if you're using Kubernetes, because your app is expected to be able to kind of, start quickly. But the reality of all worlds is there's always edge cases and always exceptions. And these people had a fairly legitimate case, I guess. So we needed to be able to give them a way of refreshing those credentials, which resulted in us updating instead of killing when the TTL was about to expire, and expecting the app to reread from those files and watch them as they changed. The next thing that we had to deal with was a fairly obvious one, which we kind of were ready for, but we didn't implement it until we needed it, which was the ability to have different roles. Some apps don't really want to be able to do DDL. You probably don't want them creating and deleting tables. Maybe you don't want them doing certain things, and we also needed a DBA role to go in and nuke things when stuff went wrong. As well as that, we had a rather strange one, which came up kind of by accident, really, where we had these config maps, which were detailing how you get to these systems, including the cross-region replica that we set up. So as well as having our reader and writer set up, we also had a full bin log replication to another cluster in a different region for really, really sturdiness. But to be able to reach that, they needed the config maps of how to get there. So now you've got a publicly exposed config map on an app where engineers are going to develop. And you really, really don't want anyone logging into a downstream replica unless they really have to, in case they break everything. So the DBAs requested, and it was a very good request, that we restrict that config map to only the roles that need it. Which is fair enough. I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to do.
Indeed.
And finally, we originally had this console called RIC, which stood for Remote Incident Console. Originally it was called IRC, which stands for Internet Relay Chat. Look, I get it. I'll just keep to my day job, fine. So the problem with this was, it wasn't just incidents. A whole bunch of people needed to be able to read their data. They needed to be able to do stuff alarmingly regularly. So where we had assumed there would be an incident, we had to reduce this restriction down to just some sort of auditable ticket. And that's sort of more or less what we had to do. So, you know, if you've ever worked in software, you'll know that software is never, ever complete.
Indeed. Well, there a lot of work that was involved in getting and building all of those systems. It was interesting to work through the different use cases that we spoke about. And when we finished all of this, what was great to see was more and more customers were using our stuff.
Don't leave. Don't leave.
Support needed from us was really minimal. But what was really interesting was every single time an engineering team was trying to provision a data store, they would come down to us, and they've done everything that they needed to in terms of writing down YAML, talking about the infrastructure they need, be it a Redis, be it a S3. Once they used to deploy the YAML, they would come down to us. Is my data store ready? How do I know I can use it now? They shouldn't be coming down to us. They should be able to get that information on their own. That's wherein we identified a gap. Something was missing. They needed to have that information. And so we designed a front-end service. While this information is available in AWS console, it's per region. Also, we wanted to have all the information that was non-AWS related available in the front-end service. And that's wherein we ended up adding a new tuning over there. What was also interesting is, while you would provisioning your data store, you would need sometimes to do certain things when things really, really go wrong, like backup and restore. What do you end up doing in those scenarios? What about how does my usage metrics look like? What are the data stores that a single team ends up owning, be it a Redis, be it a S3, anything? So all of that information was being made available in this one single place by the click of a single button.
And it looked real cool.
So with all of this work, with the front end being designed, with all of these components being built, it was great to see how customers were using our stuff. Any greenfield project that was being created, yes, they were just following the standard process of using the system. But there's always something, right?
There is always something.
In reality, there were many systems and many data stores existed even before we ended up in designing this standard way of doing things. We started then focusing and looking at how do these systems that already exist benefit from this standard, compliant, and secured way of doing things? That is where we ended up focusing our energy into migration. So yes, these systems were already there. We wanted to ensure they get benefited with our standard way. But this needed some extra work that was required. Let's talk about Aurora, which was the complicated one. There were a few simple steps that the customer had to follow. One, the cluster need to be renamed wherein it follows the standards that we had set. The other aspect was considering, is it in the right VPC? Is it in the right subnet? What about the security groups? The other thing that we had to take care of was asking the engineering teams to actually change the application wherein they could fetch the credentials and the configuration that our files were providing to their systems. This was one of the bigger case. The other aspect that we had to consider was we had these sensible set of defaults that we defined around the clusters, which worked for majority of the customers. But for certain scenarios, no. Those settings didn't work for them, and we had to go down and extend the things that we were providing so that they could support custom profiles, wherein there will be a different set of cluster settings that would be available for them. We didn't end up supporting everything, but we did end up extending for those critical systems.
So not too many variations. Oh, this is my bit. Bugger. Okay, didn't see that. Right, the other thing that we had to do was embrace the true meaning of Christmas. It's November 23rd, which is close enough. It's only a month and 2 days off. So we had we had a problem of too much success, a thing I'm sure you all know very well, which is that we had too many databases, and a bunch of them were not really being used so heavily, and it was getting kind of expensive. So we had this situation where there are a lot of very small services not pushing a bunch of work, but still using a full cluster. And so we decided to sort of set up a metaphor of sharing a database between related services. And the related bit is quite important because you're taking that risk back on of noisy neighbors and blast radius and all sorts of things like that. So what we did is we made sure that one of those services owned the data store and the others could be allowed to look at it, but preferably in a completely different schema if you're used to normal databases, or database if you're used to MySQL. And by doing this, we could make sure that several apps could use the same cluster, improving the cost of everything, and making everyone generally a little bit happier. Now, during this long and arduous process, we discovered a bunch of weird things. Maybe they're normal to you, maybe they're not, but I'm going to say them anyway, and you're going to enjoy it. And it goes like this. S3 has an extremely hard limit of 1,000 buckets per account. Some limits in AWS are kind of flexible, some you can push pretty hard, but we tried chocolates and wine and hostages, and nothing moves that limit. In the end, we had to use multiple accounts to be able to make sure that we could provision enough buckets that we did that. So we had dedicated S3 bucket accounts, which is a way. So yes, the other one that's really interesting is Reddit has a slightly hard limit of 2,000 users per account. And this creeps up on you very quickly because changing Redis users is kind of slow. It can be negotiated, but it takes time, and you should be aware of it. And I'm sure all of you here are aware that IAM has a 20 policies per role. Everyone's been bitten by that one, right? So you all know about wildcards and that. And 1,000 roles per account, which is a stunningly low number. You can update the roles per account one, that is the default, but there is nothing you can do about the 20 policies per role. And the other thing, which you probably are aware of as well, is Graviton is cool. Now, looking at this room, I get to say the thing I wasn't sure I was going to say, which is, during the early 90s, I had an Acorn. Yeah? No. Okay. Well, that was a machine that used ARM processors, and ARM's back, and it's better. It's cool. Gravitons can do usually the same amount of work, but for about half the price. If you can use them, you should use them. They're very good.
So, with all the standardization, the migration, the different components, front-end work, where did we get to? Those numbers over there, yes, those are the instances and clusters that we have in production today. Around 200 teams are using our stuff, and 1,400 Aurora instances in production. One of the interesting things to know, Zendesk is 15 years old, but with this new system that we ended up building, close to half of that data is in our new system.
We're that good. So, what we managed to do from humble beginnings, we've managed to make sure that we can deliver all data stores to all the children who want data stores. And the best systems are those that are invisible, the ones that you don't even really think about, but you use all the time. Usually these are not software, but the kind of software that's really amazing is the one that you just use without even thinking about it. Right now, several times we didn't know a whole bunch of people had added themselves onto our system. We just found out about it when they asked us some questions. And they don't tend not to notice what we're doing behind the scenes as well, which I think is rather good. We were able to take advantage of the fact that we had these tiny little YAML files. So one particular team, which I will not name for their own safety, had huge instances provisioned, but they weren't using them because they knew how much it hurt to provision a data store. So they provisioned what they needed and left it. And we pointed out they could change one line and convert, was it 4XL R5? Yeah, pretty heavy instances into T4G medium,
Yeah.
which is quite a cost saving. And all that was done with one line because our stuff could handle those changes, which I think is pretty cool. So we've been able to make sure that we can handle all of the tiny little children in the world. The last time we changed the code on a bunch of these was over a year ago. So, with the confidence that will surely mean my fall in times to come, it just works. So I want to ask you something. In the spirit of Christmas, do you believe in Santa? For the benefit of those streaming, we have just continued playing Jingle Bell Rock from the 1960s. There's two that I would say compete for this one. This is recorded, isn't it? Fuck it. So, one system had to get logs from a whole bunch of people. A lot of logs, like Nginx style, every single hit from every single service kind of log. They chose to store these logs in MySQL, which is not a good choice for that kind of volume. You should be dropping it in S3 buckets, or you should be partitioning extremely tightly, to the point where they had a single MySQL cluster with 160 gig, and it wasn't a very big cluster. And then they needed to change the table structure, and they couldn't, because table updates are really expensive at the best of times. Usually, the best way is to replace the table with a new thing and then swap the two over atomically. They couldn't even do that because it broke their instances. That was pretty bad. The other one that I thought was pretty amazing is we had a team using Dynamo, a key value store, and they had a Scala. It was a Scala library that used it as a queue and required local secondary indexes, which isn't great. You probably shouldn't be doing either of those two things, but it worked for them, so who am I to judge? Go on, ask a question. Very fair. Why did we go to such an extent? Well, it sucks to learn Terraform is the basic answer. Like, software engineers have this cruel curse where everything is it's just, hey, I want to do this. Well, just learn an entire new language and a syntax that you don't know, that you can't test locally, so that you can provision a thing. It's easy. Just do this. And Terraform is one of those million paper cuts things. Yeah, it's not particularly hard, but if you're a web dev, you don't care. You just want your database. I have a special phrase that I'm not allowed to use. I got told off for using it, about how I just want my lovely database. I don't want to write Terraform. I don't want to know how Kubernetes works. I don't care about CloudFormation. I just want a database the same as everyone else's. And that's how it should be. When you guys go and buy a bucket from a hardware store, they don't give you some sheet metal and a TIG welder. You get a bucket, because that's what you actually want. So, yes, you can learn Terraform, but not everyone is interested, and nor should they be. And I think that's a really valuable lesson that software engineers tend to overlook.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. Were there any questions for anybody in the room?
Go on, do it! Cowards.
No? I had another one then. If nobody else wants to speak, I'm more than happy to. Oh, there's one here. Can I borrow one of those two mics? My third one is apparently flat. Sorry, it was over here somewhere. Here we go. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for the talk. Very interesting and well presented. I had a question. Since you guys migrated a lot of data from the old system to the new system, what kind of problems did you encounter in migrating between those two systems? And How did you solve them? Was it automated or was it manual?
All right. Did the stream catch that? If they did,
Yep.
our lovely question asker was saying, difficulties in migration. All technical questions. So we cheated. Because of the fact that we could rename, we didn't so much copy all the data from one cluster to another, we just ate the cluster, by which we set up, it's not obvious how you have to do this. You have to set up a root user who matches what the operator expects so it can control it, and make sure that the app uses like the self-service stuff, and then you just flicker deploy. So there's two ways of accessing the cluster at any one time, the static password and the existing thing, plus all of our operator stuff that creates temporary users, and then on your next deploy with your staggered restart, your app swaps over the way in which it's connecting, and it can be seamless. We did it with an outage because it wasn't critical, it was an internal app, and there was quite a lot of those, but that was doing there. In terms of your original question, how the hell do you get it off an existing thing when you need to split it up? We do actually have a dedicated set of movers to be able to handle that case where we have things like the concept of a service of a global lock where we say, hey, anyone on this account, you can't write at all. And that kind of hurts, but if you time it right, a lot of our business is very seasonal across a day and a week boundary, so you can kind of find it. It's one of those things where the cost of not solving it is infinitely cheaper than the cost of solving a live migration, I would say. I'm sure it can be done, but I wouldn't want to do it. So, yeah. You've got to ask something for Alka. She's really good at this.
You've given the response.
I needed to make sure you all heard that because it was praise for me, which you guys haven't done.
Thank you. You're great.
Thank you. It's kind of you to say so. Completely unexpected, too.
Were there any other questions from the room? Yep.
Roughly how long end to end did this entire project take?
I can answer that one. With a team of around 10 engineers, we ended up taking 2 years, start to end. But in terms of when did the customer start using our stuff, it was within a year. We ended up seeing it. Aurora was the first one that we ended up doing.
Cool, thank you.
While migrating the data, do you also take care of the change data capture, like or it's just a straightforward lift and shift?
So you're talking about are you talking about explicit change data capture, like a Kafka output stream, or are you talking about an implicit one?
Not Kafka. In case of batch, say initial load, seed load, then followed by the everyday's load.
Got you. So when we were doing, we never did a migration of a lift and shift, but the systems we had would expect the schemas to be, schema is such an overloaded word. The DDL schema of the database, we expect it to be in place, and then we would just shunt the data. So we wouldn't like pre-build, we wouldn't get it to build the schema and update it as it went. We would make sure that that matched, and then we would just do a straight data copy.
Cool. All right. Well, we are a little bit over time, so we might wrap it up there. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Invite Jason back up to the front. Thank you very much. You want, not that one? Yep, that one. Should get Jingle Bells back as our hold music.
I can do it.
There we go. Did you want mirroring or no? It is mirroring at the moment.
Actually, that's cool. I'll look through. No.
What are you trying to set up?
Trying to not do mirroring.
So you want one of these ones.
There we go. Alright, and swap.
You just want to send that window down, or you want to swap them entirely?
Yeah, so I'll flick the...
So this is your main now, so this is where your notes will appear, your presentation will be over there.
Yeah. No, that's not what I want. No, that's okay. All right, let's send Prezo. Mouse gone.
It'll be over that way, yep.
All right.
No, you need to swap.
Beautiful. Finally.
All right, I'm not going to do an intro for you because you put too many Star Wars dad jokes in your bio and I'm not going to read them. So, Jason, everybody.
Hey, everyone. So I am back with part 2 of my talk on Systems Manager. The other one was a few months ago, well, July, so several months ago. But yeah, so let me just start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respect to elders past and present. So, quick bit about me. I work for Telstra Purple in Managed Services. I'm a AWS lead consultant there. Got a few certs and recently got my AWS ambassador back. So mostly I'll be on LinkedIn and you can find me jasonwood01. All right, so since this is part 2, I'll do a quick recap. SSM is massive. So I was just narrowing this down to node management. And the last one, I spoke about Fleet Manager. So that's sort of a really cool way for managing servers individually. And also had a bit of a talk about State Manager. So that's sort of, if you're wanting to manage things at scale, one of the really cool things I love about State Manager is how easy it is to do EC2 stops and starts. So if you want to turn your servers off in your non-prod environments, have a look at the last talk where I went through that. But yeah, State Manager is really cool for and really easy for that. Caveat, as I have down the bottom, it does use cron for the scheduling, but it's a little bit weird. So, check out, the easiest way to find that is just do a search on Systems Manager cron, and that will bring up the a whole page on how to configure that. All right, so again, I'm going to be covering, mainly 2 services out of the node management. And I'll be starting off with Session Manager rather. So this sort of ties in a little bit with Fleet Manager in that Session Manager, as the name suggests, lets you create a session on your EC2 instances. Again, you don't need any external connectivity for this. So that's what makes it really cool. If you think back to when I did the Fleet Manager, I talked about how you probably really want to configure KMS in that to be able to get the full functionality out of Fleet Manager. It actually gets configured in Session Manager, so which is a little bit weird, but I'll show you that when I hit the demo. One of the other really cool things is there is a Session Manager plugin for the CLI. So, if you'd rather do things from the command line, then this is where you do that. So let me go to a demo and I'll see. Yep. All right. So let me just hide my talk here. All right, so I've created a little test environment. I've just got a couple of servers running. So as you can see, we have no public IP v4, networking. If I can, security rather. If I scroll down, you see my Linux box, I've got no access. I've also got another role which connects me to an RDS. And similarly, in the Windows server, no inbound rules there. It's using an EC2 role that has the SSM managed instance core, which you need. So those are the basics for being able to connect to SSM. And the other thing that you need, just show you briefly, there's no internet gateways in this, so no way for data to go out or come in. But we do have the endpoints. Main ones that you need for SSM, EC2 messages, and SSM messages. All right, so how do we connect? And let me find Systems Manager. So, Session Manager, really simple. Start session. It lists all the instances that you've got available that actually have the agent installed. Oh, that's the thing I forgot to mention. Your instances do need to have the SSM agent. Various instances already come with that. I go through that more in my first talk, but most of your Amazon Linux, Red Hat, Red Hat does not. Amazon Linux, I think SUSE does, and your Windows servers. So, cool way, just start a session and bang, without having any external access from the console. Now I'm connected into my instance. Right. Turn caps off. Cool. And similarly, if you're using Session Manager with Windows servers, you get a PowerShell session. So as I said, in the preferences here is where you enable KMS. So while the default you have TLS encryption between your console and your service, if you enable KMS, you'll also see a nice little using encryption tag underneath when you connect. So other things that you've got in your preferences, so you can also enable both CloudWatch and S3 logging. So any commands that people are running when there will automatically go to logs. And you can set up shell profiles as well. So these will get run again before your people jump in and connect. So if you need to do things to track what people are doing, you can do that for shell profiles and your logging. You can also set out some session timeouts, durations, and here by default, when you connect, they'll all connect as a SSM user. But for Linux sessions, you can enable this and run as different as a different user. So that's all nice, but people will need to sort of come into Session Manager to try and find all this. Cool thing now, you can actually just from your EC2 go into Connect, and you get that same sort of thing. So if you click this, it'll actually take you straight and open a Session Manager window. Also too, from here, you can also connect using Fleet Manager to launch an RDP session. Again, without having any sort of external access. So that one's really, really handy. Okay, cool. That's all console. But most of us like to use the CLI. So let me just trying to do this holding a microphone is not as easy. All right, so I'll start my login. Achilles. All right, so all authenticated in. Now, with most of the, well, pretty much all these commands, one of the things that you do need to do is be able to supply the instance ID of the instances that you're running. Again, typing, holding a microphone. Yeah. Thank you. Bloody hell. That's what my wife says. Typing that is. Close. All right. So let's start off with the Windows instance. If I can actually get the copy to work. Hang on, I'm putting the mic down. All right. So, how do we just do our basic connect? The basic statement, as we have here, is AWS SSM start session. So this is really what you need that SSM plugin for. And you give it the instance. Now, similar with starting up the console, it does take a little while to initially kick in. But once you connect, it's actually quite responsive. So here we go, we've connect. Yeah, you see it's complaining about updates, but there's no connectivity, so I can't download anything from my little example. But yeah, you've got in PowerShell. Awesome. Okay, but it's a Windows server. You're not always going to be using PowerShell. You're going to have some GUI stuff. So this one is really cool. You can actually do port forwarding. So, the document name is all pretty straightforward. Start port forwarding session. And that will actually start a session up and will port forward whatever port you have specified to a local port. Now, we get here waiting for connections. So it's done the port forwarding and it's all ready to go. So I'll pull up my remote desktop. This one, you can see here, I've set it up with the local host and the port. I've already configured in the admin user and password in there, so that's just good to go. And bang. In RDP session to my Windows server that has no inbound or outbound internet connectivity. You know, I think that's that's pretty cool. You know, and you know that port forwarding works for anything. So you know your web servers, whatever. You know you can just you know forward to a web browser if you've got that. Any other software that you're running that needs a client, you know, you can just port forward to that and just connect local. And just Control C to exit out there. All right, so the next thing, the command that I'm going to show, and this one is actually super cool. And this came out not all that long ago, but you can now do port forwarding to a remote host. This example here that I'm using is I'm going to connect to my RDS instance through my Linux host. And you see, this one was actually really quick. So here's my SQL workbench, local host to the port, and I will just copy this password. Now, this is a temp account. I'm going to blow it away after this, so I don't really care about people seeing. And bang, I'm connected to my Aurora MySQL. Again, no internet connectivity. Yeah, and you know, you have a look, you can actually see that you know the instance is not publicly accessible. So, yeah, some really cool things. If you just do a search on what is it, Session Manager plugin, it will come up with you know how to start sessions and what you know all of these commands that I'm putting in here. So yeah, some really handy ways to connect to your instances without having to have a workspace, a jump box, Bastion host, whatever. You know, just connect SSM, connect your plugin, and you know, away you go. All right. What I'll probably do, which is just going to make things a little easier, I'll just jump straight back into the PowerPoint. Let's just make this full screen. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the run command. So obviously the previous session manager, that lets you just connect to a single instance, but if we want to use SSM to manage our infrastructure at scale, run commands is where you want to do this. Basically you create documents. Also too, AWS has a whole stack of them as well that you can use. You know, and use as inspiration, and that lets you run those on one or more servers. You can easily save the outputs to S3 to review later, and it also makes it really easy to rerun your commands either exactly the same or just by changing, parameters and so forth as well. And sit here, and you can write your own documents as well. So if you've got something that you want to run multiple times, then write up your document, and away you go. So let's flick back to another demo. Yeah. And we'll go to run commands. Right. The way to run it, really easy. Just click your run command button. And as you can see here, there are heaps of different run books that AWS has. Even things like here allow you to, install different AWS packages on your servers. One that I really like, well, there's two: run PowerShell or run a shell script. So from here, I can go down and let's just let's do a uname -a. And you can make this sort of as complex as you want, but anything that you'd run as a shell script or on the command line, you can put in there, and similar for PowerShell with the other run book. Then you come down, you can specify to run these based on tags, resource groups, or in this case, I'll do this manually. One interesting thing here, you'll see that it's only running my Linux instance, because this runbook only works for Linux or Mac OS. So it's sort of smart enough. If you've got a whole bunch of instances, it will only display the types that you need. All right. So that you can put in a whole bunch of other parameters there. I'm not going to worry about the S3 bucket because I don't have one in this count. This is something that's reasonably cool, and I haven't, I don't use it too much, but occasionally we'll like to have a bit of a squiz. It actually shows you the command, the CLI command to run what we've got up here. All right, and so I click run. And here we go. Now, I mean, this is a trivial example with just one target, but as it goes through, it'll show you, how many targets you've aimed for, how many have completed successfully, and if any of them have issues, how many errors and so forth. And then down here, you can actually go in and see the output of those commands and any errors in here. So, so here we go. It's run its route, and this is the info from the uname -a. So for the command, as I said, you can easily rerun. Hitting rerun just runs exactly as it was. So, maybe if you had some errors that weren't necessarily related to your code, but something else, you could fix that, rerun. But the copy to new is where it basically has exactly the parameters that you've put in, but it lets you go in and update and modify. And where this is really good is when you're doing it based on tags, and you maybe first want to run on your dev environments. That's all good. Then you can go back and rerun on your test, your pre-prod, etc. So just update your tags to run it as is. And when you have and you may not want to sort of do that straight one after the other, but you can click your command history and then go back and find, all right, which date did I run it? What was the command? And have a look in the command history for the one that you want to rerun. So that's System Manager run commands. Really, really handy for running. Actually, So I do have one thing to show. Well, couple of things more. So I gave a pretty trivial example before, but at another customer, we had their Linux servers were authenticating to Red Hat IPA, and we wanted to move that to authenticate to AD. So, I created this document. So you can see, you can actually put in some reasonably complex sort of run commands. So this would basically be a bash script in and run that. And you sort of enter that in the documents. You just create a document, and you can do it in JSON if you hate people, or you can put it in YAML if you want to allow people to read things nicely. The other cool thing when you're doing your own, you'll probably go through iterations and test it out, add things. You'll actually, as you save, you actually get document versions, and so you can test things. If something doesn't work, you can sort of go back to a previous version, and you can sort of run things as in different versions as well if you've got a particular reason to. So this is really handy for managing your infra at scale, just being able to sort of run things on a whole bunch, so long as you've got things tagged nicely. Right, so back to my Prezzo. The final thing that I want to talk about is Patch Manager. So Patch Manager, as the name suggests, is AWS's tool for managing patching. Not quite there. Really what Patch Manager does is it will set your schedules and sort of the types of patches that you want. So AWS Patch Manager doesn't actually contain the patches. So if your instances still need to be able to get out to whatever their patch source is. So RPM repository for Linux servers or out to Windows Update, but the Patch Manager will be able to schedule when your patches are run and what sort of level of patches, your criticals, etc. I'm not going to show you a demo for that because I absolutely hate it in the console, and I've not been able to work out how to do it. It's horrendous. However, as you can see there, if you do it in CloudFormation, I mean, that's obviously not the full thing, just enough to fit on. But yeah, CloudFormation, you can actually set it out so you can actually follow what it does logically, and not be stuck in a stupid loop in the console. I'm sure there are probably some people that can make sense of it in the console, but I'm not one. So yeah, there you go. Session Manager, if you want to connect to your systems securely without having any external access, Session Manager, great. Session Manager plugin for the CLI, even better. Managing your stuff at scale, run commands. Really handy for just running those scripts across all your environment, and then Patch Manager to keep everything up to date. So thank you.
So we are over time, but we can squeeze in a question or two if anybody has any questions for Jason.
I'm just surprised.
Hang on, just hold on a sec. Let me give you this.
I'm just surprised that you connected RDS using Session Manager, that AWS claims that it's not publicly accessible, the instances.
Yeah. It's I mean, all of these examples actually came from AWS, so that's it's doable, it's easy. These are some of these things are reasonably new, but some of them have actually been around for a little while, just, not talked about too much. So, yeah, and look, I also think, you go back and have a look at the July meeting where I spoke about Fleet Manager. If you're managing single, just managing what's going on in your instances, there's a lot in there which really cool, especially just being able to fire up RDP from the console. It's cool.
Cool. We might call it there. Thank you very much, Jason.
No worries.
If you do have any questions for Jason, I'm sure you're not running off straight away.
Nope.
Just grab him after this. Or if you are watching online, you're on Slack sometimes too, right? So.
Yeah, I'm quite often. Yeah, I'm quite often online on the Slack.
Cool. Thank you very much. All right, so we have our. Actually, before I do that, a big thank you to our speakers for tonight, to Alka, to Jeffrey, and to Jason. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, they're here if you want to harass them after this. All right, so quickly before we wrap up, we have our marketplace segment. Just so we don't spend too much time on this, is there anybody that's actually hiring at the moment? There's a couple of people. All right, this will be a quick one then, that's good. Sponsors first. So the way this works is we don't ask you to put your hand up if you're looking for work, because you might be sitting next to your boss, or your boss might be watching the live stream, and that might be a bit of a shock for them. If you are looking for work, pay attention to who's speaking and go and quietly grab them at the end of the session.
Cool. Hello, everyone. You know who I am. I'm not going to repeat that. I work for CMD, but I'm not going to talk about any roles at CMD today. A couple weeks ago, so background, CMD is part of Pantel Group. And a couple of weeks ago, one of the founders of CMD started another brand within Mantle Group, which is cybersecurity related. Or not cyber related, it is purely focused on cybersecurity. So for that brand, we are now looking for security people, both hands-on, also GRC, which is government risk compliance people. So if you're interested in a role like that, easiest place to go is mentalgroup.com.au on the current opportunities, because it's not my thing.
Thank you, Ian. You're up next.
Hi everyone, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
So my name's Grace and I'm part of the People and Culture team at CEVO. So basically we specialise in DevOps, cloud migration, cloud native, data engineering and managed services. So we're an AWS advanced consulting partner. Feel free to pop over and exchange LinkedIn details, and I can reach out to you with the open opportunities we've got at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there no one else for that one? All right, let's bring this home so we can get out of here. So I mentioned before, thank you very much to our speakers, but also thank you to our sponsors, to CMD, to Versant, and to CEVO for supporting us for 2022. Round of applause for all of them. Thanks very much. And every month I stand up here, and every month I say, I should put NAB on this slide too, but I always forget. Big thank you to NAB for providing us with this awesome space over the past 12 months as well. As I mentioned at the start, we don't have, that's not a question, that's a statement, whoops. We don't have our December event on because it's the 27th, it would be the 27th, and I don't think anybody wants to show up here on Wednesday the 27th of December. So we take December off. We will be back again on the 25th of January, which is the day before Australia Day, so the date might move around a little bit if we go for a better date, but we'll see. We will have our usual post-reInvent panel discussion sort of wrap-up thing on that day, and we usually try to make that one a little bit more social and stuff as well, so we might have some other things going on too. But keep an eye on the meetup page and our Twitter account or Slack. Once we've got all the details finalized, we'll let you guys know. So with that, thank you very much.